Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Here we are, Marco.
Sean, we are on video today, so we need to look good, or at least as much as we can.
I don't know if I do that or not, but nonetheless, here I am in the flesh on camera, and it's story time.
It is story time, and I think today we are going to have no problem at all in pulling teeth and have our guests telling stories. I think we're just going to watch and listen and chill, but it's an important story.
We'll just sit back and watch. Exactly.
Yeah, and learn.
That's the main thing, is to learn. And the interesting thing for me for this is it's multi-tiered. I mean, we're looking at the healthcare space today, which clearly involves patients, and they're using services to stay healthy. And the service provider works with other service providers and hospitals and things to provide those services. So it's a big mix of technology and process and operations, all in support of the patient. And one little glitch in there and all things could go haywire. So this is about security and privacy, the value of securing systems and data to enable services to be provided, but also protect those services and the data as patients are using the services. So enough for me, because nobody wants to hear me talk, even myself. And we're going to get into it here with our good friends, Blaise Wabo and Rudi Perkins. Thanks so much for being part of this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Sean.
And Blaise, I'm going to start with you. A quick word about yourself and what you are up to at the moment.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Blaise Wabo. I am with A-LIGN. We're a security compliance firm. I'm currently based out in Denver, Colorado. It's getting a little hot, but the weather is usually nice in Denver. Been with A-LIGN for about 8 years, and I lead a healthcare practice. I'm a director, which means I focus on the high trust and HIPAA audits primarily, and anything healthcare that falls under that. Prior to A-LIGN, I worked for KPMG doing similar audits, so been in the industry for about 11 years. Now, the key thing in part of my introduction is for the last 5 years or 6 years, actually, my team has been primarily focused on high trust. So we don't do a lot of any other things besides high trust and HIPAA, which means that we are very skilled and experienced in what we do. So.
That's very good, and I'm sure we'll touch on this, Rudi. But high trust encompasses a lot of things. So just high trust can mean a lot, right? And I suspect we'll get into some of that today. Rudi, a few words about yourself, and then following that, I want to get into what Welvie does, which is who you're representing today.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm Rudi. I'm the CTO of Welvie. We are a small business. We provide data services, data analytics to large national insurance companies. So obviously, we are expected to protect their data to the maximum extent possible. It's not always as easy as it should be when you're a small business. We've been high trust certified for about 6 years, and that's been a giant help to us in a lot of different ways, both in security and compliance. We've worked with A-LIGN. We're a customer of A-LIGN's. They are our assessor for high trust. We have a great relationship with them. We do a lot of other projects with them as well. What really struck me about our conversation today was the focus that you guys have on the human interaction, right? And I think that's important, and especially for me, because when I started with high trust 6 or so years ago, I made every mistake you can make. I was really very unprepared, and it had a rather deleterious effect on my life. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and before I open my eyes, think, oh my God, there's nothing that's going to be good about today as I try to struggle through this. So I like to represent guys like me, small business CTOs that have gotten themselves in some trouble and some deep water, and don't quite know where to turn or how to get out of that. So I appreciate the opportunity to come talk about that with you guys.
Yeah, I love it. Lessons learned are always extremely valuable, right? We're kind of all learning as we go, certainly as things change from underneath us. Pandemic is one example, right? Working from home, all these changes how we have to look at things. And that doesn't even just tackle the problem of there's a big problem to address anyway from a security and privacy perspective. Rudi, I want to go back 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
And tell me about the trigger, the driver behind becoming HITRUST. And how did you look at that? Because as you got into it, clearly you encountered some things that made it difficult. But did you foresee that? Did you have conversations with your executive peers of what that might look like? Tell me a little about the founding story of getting HITRUST compliant.
Yeah, sure. Like we started in the company was started in 2008, and like I said, when I think about a small business, I'd say something that's 50 or so or less employees, even a lot fewer employees than that. Somebody that doesn't have a dedicated VP of compliance or risk or something like that. The risk and compliance is sort of spread amongst people that are already just in the company doing other jobs, right? So that's the voice I'm trying to have here. When we first were required by one of our clients to get a HITRUST certification, I looked at it more as just another spreadsheet, these compliance spreadsheets that all your clients give you. I looked at it like that, and everybody sort of deals with that in the beginning, and a lot of our clients are still using these spreadsheets instead of something more formal. So when I got this giant binder of HITRUST requirements on my desk, I was like, oh, it's just another afternoon of fighting through these terrible questions, and I'll turn it back in and everything will be fine. And I really had a misconception as to what that was. I think a lot of small businesses that don't start out with a lot of compliance specialty already are going to be in this sort of predicament. So I started treating it as a spreadsheet, and I quickly got into deep trouble. I was paying fees to an assessor and unable to provide them with the information they needed, either because I didn't have the documentation yet, or because I just didn't have enough time. It was just me, and it was a dumb way to do it. So horrible days back then. I've grown along with my team relative to our security and compliance and governance. We've been with A-LIGN for a few years. We've grown with them. They've become very specialized and good at what they do. And I think HITRUST has also grown. As their different versions have come out, I think they've improved mightily. And I'm very sanguine about the prospects for HITRUST. I really want them to be wildly successful, because I think they're our best hope, at least for companies of my size. They're great for everybody, but if we can get them to do things exactly how they say they want to do it, then it'll be really helpful for small businesses across the country.
Yeah. And Blaise, I'm going to look at you, and you said that you're just focusing on HITRUST, and Sean made the joke about, well, that's a lot to, it's not really just. And I think this is exactly where you come in between this complexity that Rudi is looking at, and he is just the example of many others out there, and how you come into place to help them to create more the mindset to take care of these, instead of just checking, check marks and then feeling like you're not getting anywhere. So how do you approach this process?
It's funny because we A-LIGN, we didn't hear about HITRUST until 2014. And it's funny because HITRUST has been around since 2007, so about 7 years by that time. And the reason why we were hearing about HITRUST was because almost every order of our client was coming to us and asking A-LIGN, can you guys help us become HITRUST certified? We've gotten this letter from our payer that says you need to be certified in 2 years. We tried to fight it for about a year, but towards the third quarter of 2015, we quickly realized if we don't get on the wagon, we're going to lose a lot of business and maybe credibility in the industry, because HITRUST is growing. So that's how we became HITRUST certified as a firm in 2015, later in the year. And the good thing with HITRUST is it's not a one-time checklist type of assessment. It's very comprehensive, it's very scalable, and it's very flexible in the approach. I think it's one of the only security or privacy frameworks that we have out there that has done a very good job to map to any other existing standard there is out there. I mean, I can go through the list, but they've mapped through SOC 2, they've mapped
That's my point,
PCI.
Blaise. Yeah, that all these standards and frameworks, right? Yeah, so go through them. I think it's important.
Yeah. They've mapped through SOC 2, PCI, ISO 27001, NIST 800, FISMA, FedRAMP, different privacy laws, including the GDPR in Europe and the CCP in California. They've mapped to the some other international laws like the Singapore privacy law, some different US state laws as well from the privacy perspective, like the Texas law, Nevada, Massachusetts, and South Carolina. The list goes on and on, right? They have currently over 40 different regulatory factors that have mapped to. So what that means is if any company goes through HITRUST and they add this particular standard, they can show to their stakeholder that having done HITRUST, we've completed or addressed all the controls from these different other standards. And there's a clear mapping on how we can show you how our evidence maps to that, and we meet those controls as well. So I'm sure Rudi always says this joke: if you get done with HITRUST first, any other assessment becomes somewhat of a joke. So.
Yeah, Rudi, talk to me about that, because I mean, as Blaise is listing all those frameworks and standards, and I was thinking of even a few more as he was rambling them off. I was picturing multiple spreadsheets with multiple tabs.
Yeah.
Trying to figure this out. And you said you quickly realized that tackling it tactically, if you will, could be overwhelming and challenging, and maybe not really meet the objective that you're trying to achieve. So how did you change your mindset to be, I'll just say, more security oriented versus checkbox?
What I would say is that the thing I like about the HITRUST CSF as compared to the other ones, like if you don't have a compliance background and you go read the NIST 800, it is a giant mass of difficult material to read. It's very hard to figure out how you can take that and apply it directly to your business, especially in a small business model. But HITRUST has kind of like percolated all that stuff, and they've created a CSF that is very, very actionable and very thorough. And so I don't have to go thinking about what SOC says versus what NIST says versus what FedRAMP says. I just do the HITRUST CSF. And as soon as I get my cert, I can now translate that into any of the other ones. People ask me, I'm like on a bunch of, forums and user groups and stuff. And a lot of them are like, hey, I already have this SOC. Can I just turn in that evidence and get this HITRUST cert? And I'm like, that's not quite how it works. It's really the other way around. SOC means you've done some good work. It means you have a point in time reference, and that's great. And, people want to see that. But having a HITRUST certification means you can go backwards very easily. So we did a project. I had a pretty tough prospect. It was a smaller firm. They didn't have a lot of knowledge about HITRUST. So they said, yeah, HITRUST sounds good, but can you get a SOC? And I was like, oh, and another spreadsheet I got to run. So I called Blaise and I was like, Blaise, what do you think about this? How can we get this done so I don't have to do any of this stuff? And Blaise said, you know what? The mapping is great. You have tons of evidence already with your last cert. Let me work on it for a while. So he called me a couple times, asked for a couple things, and then at the end he gave me a SOC because all my evidence and materials were already there based on the work that we had done. So going in that direction is actually pretty easy, and we were very successful with it. So
and Rudi, when you say the SOC, was it an L2 or L1 or
SOC 2? Yeah, and we were very appreciative of Blaise's work because he's the one that had to do all the mapping for us. So thanks, Blaise. All love to him.
So Blaise, talk to me a bit about that process then, because it's not just assessing, but it's also proving that the controls are in place, right?
Correct.
And there will be gaps. So first you have to scope, right? What is the scope that you're assessing, and why does that matter? And then where are the gaps? So tell me a little bit about that process. And then soon I want to get into why this matters, what the value is. But talk to me a little bit about the process of assessment, gap identification, presenting and demonstrating controls.
Absolutely. And Rudi, thank you for the props there. But I have to give a shout out to HITRUST as well. They've done a great job by putting a mastermind CSF framework, which does the mapping almost seamless for everybody in the industry. Plus, using their portal, My CSF, if you have a subscription, and annual subscription that is, you can also demonstrate how the mapping is done with a click of a button, literally. But to answer your question, Sean, Rudi and Welvie has been a client of ours for about 4 years now. They had been previously certified before they came to us, okay? And when they came to us, we took the time to do a very high-level risk assessment, right? What controls do you currently have in place? Was your HITRUST thoroughly done by your previous assessor? Are there any gaps? We did identify some few gaps. We told them what those gaps were, and it took the time to implement those. HITRUST requires a 90-day period for new controls to be in place. So once we got them through their recertification for a second time, and we understood the environment very well in terms of a security and compliance standpoint, they had a later request regarding SOC 2. And I said, it doesn't make sense for us to charge you another $25,000, $30,000 to do a full SOC 2. We already know your environment. SOC 2 is for lack of better terms, an easier audit to pass compared to HITRUST. So we used their HITRUST evidence, and we had just completed the HITRUST maybe 30, 60 days before then. So most of the evidence were still reliable, if you will. We took the SOC 2 framework, we took their HITRUST evidence, we plugged in all the controls for them and the evidence where it maps to the for the controls for HITRUST. Again, HITRUST has done all the mapping. We were just basically filling in the boxes, if you will. And because we are a CPA firm as well, we can do a SOC 2 audit. So within 3 weeks of the request from Rudi, we're able to turn around a report that was satisfiable to their customer. And I think that's one of the beauties with HITRUST. If your stakeholders understand the value of HITRUST and how the framework maps to any other existing standards, they can appreciate the mapping that you give to them with the confidence that the quality work from HITRUST perspective has already been done, and now you can use your evidence to validate your compliance with most other standards.
So let's look at this from another point of view, which is the business side of things, right? So a lot of acronyms, a lot of things that checklists and things that need to be done for compliance, but ultimately we do all these because of the industry you're in, the privacy, and the way that you can offer a service to the customer of your business. So how these, and this is the question for both of you, to have the different perspective. Let's start with Rudi. How does your business see the value in all of these that you've been doing?
Yeah, and I told you that we started in 2008, right? And so we had a good 6 or 7 years of kind of startup-y sort of operation where we struggled for a little bit. We were month to month on our bills until we started rolling some customers in. But we didn't really get a good foothold with some of our largest customers until we had our security in place and we're beginning this process of the HITRUST certification. So for us, customers expect you to be able to demonstrate exactly how you're going to protect their data. So for 6 or 7 years, I would be like, I'd tell the sales guys, hey, just put me on this call. I'll whip them through it. I'll show them diagram. Don't worry, I'll talk us out of this, right? And didn't work. It's the first time in my career I couldn't talk my way into a sale, right? They were like, sounds like you have a lot of security, Rudi, but show us, where is it? You can't just walk in here and think we're going to give you all this valuable data. So for us, the conversion to a compliant and secure organization with the ability to show evidence of that was absolutely crucial. I mean, we probably would have lost 20% of our clients without this type of certification. Now, could I have got that with one of the other, specific certifications? Maybe, but it was HITRUST that drove us to change our organization from just a bunch of guys shooting from the hip, whipping software out as fast as we could into a real company that was doing actual security and demonstrating that with a real compliance program. And we owe that to the stringent requirements from HITRUST.
And Blaise, how does it work? How does it look actually from your point of view when you start working with a client and you have to help them to prove that there is a business value in what you do?
Sure, Marco. And that's a great question. And, Rudi and Welvie are the type of client that takes security very seriously. The clients that we do not typically like working with are the companies that will come to us and say, we just want to check the box and move on, right? Because we know there is a real threat out there, a threat to companies' business value proposition. If you get hacked, you might go out of business, and that affects a lot of people in the community, right, that rely on that job and things along those lines, and plus our data as well. So to answer your question, we do a very thorough scoping assessment with our clients to ensure what are their business objectives, how would HITRUST actually help them, and how we can make sure that getting the value of the HITRUST report can meet their business objectives as well. So we do that mapping for them from a scoping standpoint. We try to make sure that we're pulling in the executive suite or the project sponsors, right? That we're talking with the right people through that process, and that we are making sure that the actual objectives that are the larger objectives for the company are being met as we're planning this assessment. Because as you guys may know, it's not a cheap process. It takes time. And you want to make sure that you are getting a security benefit out of the assessment, but also a business value. So we do all that mapping with our clients from the beginning before we even jump into any of the assessments.
And another thing, and Sean, then I'm going to let you get in, it's the idea that is the same process for everyone. Even if you're in the same industry, is not. It's every business is different. You can't go cookie cutting solution there, right?
Yeah, most of what I see on the forums and stuff are people that have those very specific questions. They're like, here is a requirement from HITRUST, and it's one of 600. They're like, how do I interpret this requirement? Like, this is meaningless for me. I'm a tiny business. I don't need to manually identify each person that asked me for a password reset. I know everyone in my company. Why do I have to have a piece of paper that says that? So it's very different. The interpretations can be different, and you need to work with your assessor to make sure that your interpretation of an interesting requirement meets what HITRUST's objective really is, because and they do change based on the size and scope of your business.
And it really boils down to the ability to present the proof, right? So even if that person knows everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly.
What if they're not there tomorrow? They're on vacation for the week, right?
And speaking of the human effect, like again, with the tiny business, we're all used to just operating and not worrying about the paperwork. And that's a sea change for a company of my size. Like, my network engineer doesn't want to hear me tell him that he has to fill out a document when or document in some way when somebody asks him for a password change. Those are hard things to change. Yes, you used to be secure because your network guy knows everyone, but that's not good enough anymore. I mean, these companies aren't looking for small businesses just winging it anymore. You've got to be able to demonstrate all this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one more thing to add there, Sean, will be the fact that, as I mentioned previously, HITRUST is very scalable. What that means is if you are a company like Welvie, right, that has less than 50 employees and, maybe not a lot of transactions or data that they process on an annual basis, versus a company like Fitbit, for example, or Google, right, it will not be fair. The way the order assessments work for, let's say, SOC 2, both of those companies will have the same criteria. But the way HITRUST works is they will ask you questions from a scoping standpoint that will help tailor the requirements or the controls that fits the risk of your company. Those two companies that I just described do not have the same risk, right? Because they process different volume of data per year, different transactions per day, different employees, maybe different geographical regions, right? Welvie basically operates only in the US. A company like Google would have different cloud regions across the whole world. So, a smaller company might end up with 300 controls, but a bigger company will end up with 800 controls, right? So it's a better way to evaluate the risk of the company and do an assessment based on the residual risk. I think that's a fair and an approach that makes sense.
Yeah, and Rudi, give me some insight into how you look at this from a risk perspective, because the other thing that I always I'm always interested in figuring out if people look at it this way is, if we're trying to close the gaps on something we've built just because it was built that way, we might have added some exposure that wasn't necessary, added risk that shouldn't be there in the first place, and now we're just trying to plug it with a bunch of controls. Have you changed the way you look at how you run the business, how you build your tech stack, how you work with your partners to say, okay, the risk exposure can change, be reduced, therefore we have fewer controls necessary, fewer people involved, less to have to demonstrate? Do you look at it that way at all?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I think you really see it in the eyes of mostly of your prospects, right? I mean, we're after very large organizations. And so when we go in on a sales call, we'll see, 30 vice presidents in there, each of whom is responsible for a different aspect of their business. And there's only 2 or 3 of us in there. And any one of them can put the kibosh on a sale. So to be able to come in confidently with business processes that have been carefully designed and systems that have been carefully designed for security, number one, but with this underlying framework of compliance that we can demonstrate, it's something that they require now. They're in a very difficult threat environment. I mean, and it's been getting worse year by year, right? Like, we've had prospects and a couple of clients that are among the breaches that you read about. So they're not going to look at a company like me anymore. They're looking to eliminate their risk, and that means not giving their data to me. So that's a problem for me. And so I have to change my business processes. I have to have my employees change their mindsets. I have to make sure that they go through annual training. I have to make sure that we test them with phishing every month or every quarter, whatever it is. So it is our company is totally different this year than we were in, say, 2010. And it's almost entirely based on this threat environment that we're all facing. As Blaise said, big company gets breached. It's terrible for them. They pay a huge fine. They lose millions and millions of dollars in customers. For me, I'm out of business. That's it. So it's fatal to me. So I'm going to protect it and do as much as I can and drag my employees kicking and screaming every second of the way.
So, Blaise, Rudi is mentioning the company's change, it grows, and a different approach. And thanks to you, now it has more strength to present and sell its business. But we also, as you've been changing the past 10 years, I'm guessing the last year has been even more of a change. And we've learned, hopefully, a lot of lesson.
Bit of acceleration there.
Yeah, Sean, you said it's good to learn lesson. Yeah, it's definitely not good not to learn lesson. So, Blaise, what your business and your relationship with other business, like Rudi's business, what have you learned from this pandemic moving forward?
Sure. No, we are definitely in a very peculiar time in history, I would say, very unprecedented. We've gone through 9/11, before that, the .com, the financial crash back in the late 2008. But this pandemic, I think, has changed not only the US, but the world in a way that we've never seen before. And a lot of that has to do with security, right? People are now working from home or required to work from home. Somebody that did not know how to turn on, a Wi-Fi at their house is now required to do that if you want to be employed. So with remote working and telemedicine, as part of the pandemic, there was, the COVID-19, and people needed to still take care of their medical health. So they still needed to talk to their doctor. And that could only happen through a virtual call, through telemedicine. And I think, as you guys would agree, the bad guys, as I like to call them, they are getting more creative all the time, because that's what they do. That's how they maybe make a living. So they capitalize on the fact that everybody is now online, right? if you don't have a secured network connection to your provider, all information during that session you're being given out is being hacked by somebody in real time, right? And that's just one example out of many. So to answer your question, Marco, I think that the whole world has changed. Everybody is becoming digital, and Internet of Things is just growing more and more. Everything is becoming more digitalized. So I think that in order for any company to stay relevant, you have to take security seriously, whatever that means to your organization, right? And you can start slowly. On this particular session, we're talking about high trust, but high trust could be a goal that you have in the next few years, but at least start somewhere. It's important to take security and compliance seriously in order to be relevant in this business world in which we live in today.
Yeah, and Rudi, just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean the risk goes away, and in fact, it probably increases as you are drastically and quickly changing your infrastructure to support new working environments, new partner engagement experiences. How do you take that? And I'm sure you weren't given a pass, right?
Oh no,
you don't forget the PCI, forget the SOC, forget the. So how did you adjust to that change operationally, as well as maintaining a level of compliance for all the things you have to meet, but then also mentally maintain that culture of security that's driving this from underneath?
Yeah, we were a little bit lucky in that regard because we have a very virtual company already, and we sort of have been from the start. But I can tell you that, where our customers focus attention changes depending on what's going on in the world. And definitely they were like, what are you doing now about your work from home employees? Tell us how you're securing their environments. And, we'd always just secured the laptop and showed that on our enterprise software and said that's good enough. But we've added home office assessments or home office audits. So I got a checklist of stuff. Me and my network engineer, my system engineer, check in with our employees on a rotating basis, and we observe their home network. And sometimes we'll say, all right, log us into your router, show me the advanced logging. See here, you got scanned 4 times yesterday. 4 times yesterday. Open IP address, randomly scanned. Where the scans come from, we don't even know. I mean, people are getting attacked and they don't even know it. So we've added this extra layer to sort of show that we're helping our employees learn about what it means to be secure in their home environments. Like, you can't have your kids walking around with your USB sticks. You need to lock your laptop, even if it's at home, at your desk, with doors locked. I mean, the security postures have changed as a result of this work from home concept. And even though we've been doing it for years, our customers want to see continuous improvement there too.
And I want to get a view into the future as we get close to wrapping here. And Rudi, I'm gonna stay with you for the moment, because a lot of the value that you've presented was around generating revenue, expanding market share, getting more customers, making money.
Yep.
Are there other things beyond that in terms of partner satisfaction and helping with the bottom line? Reducing the investment in controls perhaps reduces the investment, making the return that much greater. Are there other examples you can give?
Yeah,
or that you're working toward in the future? Yeah,
we are definitely talking about ROI here, and where security is generally thought of as a back end sort of program. It can't be anymore. It has to be part of your mission. So our mission is to build great products, sell great products, make money for the company, and be secure while doing it. It's all incorporated as one. So we're talking about these certifications and how they help you do that. Well, high trust is really great, and it's improving. I have many qualms. I speak with a little bit of anonymous editorialization on some of the forums, more so than I would here. But I have criticisms of them, and I want them to get better in a lot of ways, and I think they will continue to do that. But I think, speaking for the small companies, the companies that are starting up now to attack some of these problems, they've got to build security in from the beginning, unlike what I did. And I paid a serious price for that. You need a team of people at the very beginning that's focused on compliance and security. Even if you don't have anyone with that skill, you have to start right away. And I think those things are changing. The worse the threat environment gets, the more we have to stay in front of it, especially where a large organization might consider a partner like us to be a vector for a problem.
Yeah, this is just a perfect conversation because Blaise, you say many times you have to take security seriously, and I cannot not think about that sentence in the context of a breach because that's the first thing you hear. But what you are learning here is that you do that from the beginning, and hopefully you will reduce the risk. You're never going to really eliminate it, we know that, but you can really work on that. So Rudi's lesson, your experience, how do you see high trust certification moving into the futures now that there's no borders, there's no walls, no firewalls, everything is game. There's no perimeter anymore. So how do you see the next few years moving for you guys?
Sure, that's a great question, Marco. And the audience, some of you might know that high trust in 2019 became industry agnostic. So they started as a healthcare privacy and security framework, but in the last 2-3 years, they expanded to be able to provide this CSF grade framework to everybody in the marketplace. And also they've gone beyond the US, right, by attacking GDPR. They're trying to be a premier certification body for GDPR. If they get approved for that, that's going to be a huge game changer as well. As you guys know, the European market is growing. Obviously, they got into the APAC market as well with the Singapore privacy law. But Marco, I think the sky's the limit for high trust. Making your framework industry agnostic has opened the door to in other industries like the energy and gas industry and the hospitality industry. Obviously, we learned about the hack that happened with all the Marriott chains hotels recently. They got into their hospitality industry and the utilities industry, for water, electricity, and things like that. So they're really, really expanding. And I think this framework can help other industries beyond healthcare to streamline security as a whole, right? You can manage your compliance within one program. And I think high trust offers that. And it doesn't make security become or compliance, I should say, become a strenuous check the box process, but it actually adds value to your company objectives and improves your security while doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good summary, Blaise. What we're really trying to do here is enable the business to operate securely, right? And our customers expect that of us. Our partners expect that of us. We should expect that of ourselves. And if you're like Rudi 6 years ago, trying to run multiple spreadsheets, figuring out the mapping of all this stuff, what does it mean in your environment with your tech stack and your controls or lack thereof, you're just going to go nuts. So I think a common framework that maps all those things, you do the assessment once, you look at the controls you have, you identify the gaps, you apply it to many standards, frameworks, regulations in the US and abroad, and you get a nice view that isn't somebody saying, trust me, I know my people are changing their passwords. It's proof demonstrating that you've done that assessment, that you have the controls, that you're keeping them up to date. It's not a one shot, once a year type of thing. And through the assessors, there's and then the third, the high trust assessment or validation on top of that, you have a nice chain of independence looking at all this stuff. It isn't just Rudi saying it isn't just Blaise saying it isn't just high trust saying it's the collection of everybody saying consistently, here's the scope, here's what it means, here's what we did, here's why it matters, and it's a value to the company. So hopefully that's a nice wrap.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Yeah.
Wow.
I went a little rampage there, but
it was very nice. Did you script that, or did you just?
I scripted that 2 weeks ago, and I remembered it.
No, that was good.
Very passionate about this because
yeah, you can tell.
It's very much like Blaise. I think there's tremendous value in this work, And
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of
Yeah.
I'm more like Rudi. I learned the lessons.
Yeah.
there you go.
And maybe one more thing I would add there, Sean, to your point, which was a great summary of the objectives of High Trust, is, when we started doing High Trust, I was not very happy with the fact that they had a standard change almost every 6 months, to a year. When you think about SOC, a standard can be around for 3 to 5 years before there's a change. Same thing for PCI. ISO sometimes goes longer. I think the most recent ISO might date back to 2013. But either way, the point there is I was frustrated with the fact that High Trust was always updating their standard every 6 months. Version 9, version 9.1, 9.2, 9.4, then 10 is coming out. But if you think about it, they are updating to the relevant security threats that we are facing day to day, right? So if they don't update,
Either they do it or you do it, Blaise.
exactly, they do it, and we hold our clients accountable to that. But if you think about it, if they don't do that, then your security from yesterday is not relevant today, and you have a serious threat, right? So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, current, contextual, relevant. Very quickly, any final word, Rudi, you want to say?
I'll just shout out to my other CTOs with the High Trust binder on your desk. Don't know what you're doing. You're welcome to shoot me an email, rudy@welvie.com. Please go to all the Reddit forums. All the High Trust Central is the High Trust forum. Ask a bunch of questions. Don't do this on your own. There's plenty of help, and there's plenty of people that blew it that can tell you how to do it right.
Love it.
Perfect.
That's the perfect close.
That's the spirit. That's
Yes.
the spirit.
Rudi, Blaise, absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for sharing your experience, your understanding of the value of this, and hopefully, folks got a little lesson and can think about High Trust here and the value it can bring. So
Thank you
thanks,
so
guys.
much, guys.
thank you so much, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you for listening.